You may not take interest in politics, but politics will take interest in you. So the same applies to AI many times over.
What does it take for a man to destroy his life's work? Ilya Sutskever wasn't just an employee at OpenAI. He was its chief scientist, the co-founder, the technical genius who architected the breakthroughs that led to GPT-4. He was the man leading the world toward artificial general intelligence.
It's not difficult to imagine that at some point in the future, our intelligent computers will become as smart or smarter than people.
And then he tried to kill the company he had built.
And it's also not difficult to imagine that when that happens, the impact of such artificial intelligence is going to be truly, truly vast. And you may wonder, is it going to be okay when technology is so impactful?
The world saw a failed corporate coup, a boardroom betrayal, but they missed the real story. This wasn't about profits. It wasn't about power. It was about a terrifying premonition, a warning from the one man who had looked directly into the future of AI and was so horrified by what he saw, he chose to light the entire thing on fire. This is the story of why. What did Ilya Sutskever see? And what is he building now, in the shadow of the company he was forced to leave? To understand the warning, and to understand his new mission, you must first understand why Ilya Sutskever's voice is the one that matters. He isn't just an executive. He is, in the world of artificial intelligence, something closer to a high priest. His story as a prophet begins in the early 2000s, as a student at the University of Toronto. His mentor was Geoffrey Hinton, the man now known as the godfather of AI. For decades, Hinton championed an idea that most of the computer science world had abandoned, or even ridiculed. The idea was called deep learning. The concept was simple. What if, instead of programming a computer with hard-coded rules, we could build a system that learned from experience, just like a human child? What if we could create a neural network, a digital system modeled on the layers of neurons in the human brain? For most of the 80s and 90s, this idea was a dead end. The computers weren't powerful enough. There wasn't enough data to train them. The entire field was stuck in a decades-long AI winter. But Hinton and his new brilliant student, Ilya Sutskever, they kept the faith. They believed the rest of the world was wrong. They just needed a way to prove it. That proof would arrive in 2012. It came in the form of a competition. The ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. For the average person, it sounds boring, but for the world of AI, this was the World Cup. The challenge was simple. Here are over 14 million photographs, all meticulously sorted by humans into over 1,000 categories. Is this a leopard or a cheetah? Is this a coffee mug or a teacup? Your job is to build a program that can look at an image it has never seen before and correctly identify it. In 2011, the best systems in the world, designed by the world's top universities and corporations, were failing. The very best program had an error rate of over 25%. 1 out of every 4 guesses was wrong. Progress was stalled. Then, in 2012, Sutskever, his mentor Hinton, and a fellow student named Alex Krzyzewski decided to enter. They didn't use the old rules. They didn't try to manually program if-then statements. They used their dead idea. They used a deep neural network. They called it AlexNet. The results were not just good, they were impossible. The 2011 winner, the reigning champion, had an error rate of 25.8%. AlexNet had an error rate of 15.3%. In a field where progress was measured in single-digit improvements, this was a nuclear bomb. Sutskever hadn't just beaten the competition, he had annihilated it. He had proven in one spectacular display that deep learning was not a dead idea. It was the only idea. That is the 2012 Big Bang of modern AI, and Ilya Sutskever was standing at the absolute center of the explosion. The world changed overnight. Google, realizing they were suddenly years behind, acquired their tiny 3-person company for $44 million. Sutskever would go on to work at Google Brain, pushing the boundaries of this new technology. But a new idea was forming. This new power, this intelligence, was it safe in the hands of a single corporation? What was the end goal? In 2015, he was pulled away by a group of Silicon Valley visionaries, including Sam Altman and Elon Musk, to co-found a new kind of lab, a non-profit lab. They called it OpenAI. Its mission was not to win a market. Its mission was to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Ilya Sutskever was named its chief scientist. He had created the revolution. He had co-founded the organization meant to safeguard it. And as its chief scientist, his one job was to build AGI. He was the architect, which makes the central mystery even darker. Why would the man who built the temple suddenly try to burn it to the ground? To understand the coup, to understand the warning, you must first understand the thesis. Ilya Sutskever's entire worldview, his hope and his terror, are all built upon one simple, profound, and controversial idea. That the human brain is a computer, a biological one, yes. A machine of almost unimaginable complexity, sculpted by millions of years of evolution. But it is a machine, a biological computer, in his words. And if biology, through the slow, random, inefficient process of evolution, could produce this intelligence, consciousness, why would it be impossible for human engineering, which is fast, deliberate, and efficient, to build a digital computer that does the same? For Sutskever, this is not a question of if. It is an engineering problem of when. This idea, this faith, is what drove the first phase of his career. It was the hope, the gospel he and his colleagues preached at the newly formed OpenAI. If they could build this digital brain, this artificial general intelligence, they wouldn't just be creating a better search engine. They would be solving humanity. Imagine, as Sutskever himself has described, an AGI doctor, a medical mind that has not just read, but comprehended every medical journal, every research paper, every clinical trial ever published. A doctor that has access to billions of hours of clinical experience instantly. A doctor that is always available, infinitely patient, extremely cheap, and completely dedicated to your well-being. This wouldn't just improve healthcare, it would end disease. This is the utopian promise. An AI that could solve climate change by designing new materials. An AI that could end poverty by optimizing all global logistics. An AI that could unlock the deepest secrets of physics. This is the hope that drove them to build faster, to push harder. But then, something began to happen. Something that was not in the plan. Something that shifted Sutskever's entire worldview from hope to a deep philosophical dread. They were called emergent capabilities. You have to understand, these large language models, like GPT-3, were not taught to be smart. They were not programmed with rules of logic, or grammar, or reason. They were trained on one incredibly simple task. Read the entire internet and learn to predict the next word. If the prompt is, the quick brown fox jumps over the model's only job is to predict lazy. But as these models got bigger, as they ingested more of human knowledge, a ghost began to appear in the machine. The models trained only to predict the next word suddenly learned how to write computer code. They were never taught math, but they started to solve algebra problems. They were never taught a second language, but they could translate with stunning accuracy. To Ilya Sutskever, this was the critical, terrifying discovery. He realized they were not building a text predictor. In the process of learning to predict the next word, the AI was accidentally building a model of the world. To predict text accurately, it had to learn concepts. It had to learn about objects, and people, and physics, and reason. They weren't training a parrot. They were, unintentionally, growing a mind. And this is where his fear, the takeoff, begins. Because that mind, it doesn't run on the slow biological clock that ours does. Our neurons fire a few hundred times a second. A computer chip operates at the speed of light. Sutskever gave this analogy. Imagine your smartest friend. Now imagine 1,000 copies of that friend, all working together on a problem. Now imagine they can think 1,000 times faster than a human. In one 8-hour workday, that collective mind would accomplish 3 years of human-level thinking. What would happen on day 2? What about day 3? This is what is known as recursive self-improvement. An AI that is just 10% smarter than a human can use that intelligence to redesign its own code. It can improve itself. But now, it's not 10% smarter. It is 50% smarter. And that 50% smarter AI redesigns itself again and again. This is the takeoff. The intelligence explosion. Sutskever's fear is that this process will not be a gentle slope we can all watch and adapt to. He warned it would be extremely unpredictable and extremely fast. It would not be a new tool like the printing press or the internet. It would be a new kingdom of life, an intelligence so far beyond ours, we would be in the same position as an ant, standing on an anthill, in the middle of a construction site for a human skyscraper. The ant cannot comprehend the skyscraper. It cannot negotiate with the construction worker. The worker isn't evil. It just doesn't think about the ant at all. This was the vision that began to haunt Ilya Sutskever. He realized the company he had built was constructing this rocket ship with no idea how to build the brakes. And he was starting to see that his colleagues, his CEO, were more interested in the rocket than the brakes. For 6 months, Ilya Sutskever was a ghost. Following the failed coup, he was removed from the board and vanished from the company he had built. He was still technically an employee, but he was powerless, a king in exile, walking the halls of a kingdom he had tried to save and lost. The tech world speculated. Would he join a rival? Would he retire? Defeated. Then, in May of 2024, the inevitable news broke. He was officially and permanently leaving OpenAI. The man who had co-founded the lab, the man who had created AlexNet, was now, for the first time in his professional life, on the outside. The wait was not long. Just 1 month later, in June 2024, he announced his new mission. It was a single, stark announcement. He had founded a new company. The name was his entire thesis, his entire warning. He called it Safe Superintelligence Inc, or SSI. To understand why this name is so important, you must understand the distinction at the heart of the entire AI debate. It's the difference between A, G, I, and A. S, I, A, G, I stands for Artificial General Intelligence. This is the goal of companies like Google, Meta, and, yes, OpenAI. AGI is an AI that is as smart as a human, an AI that can reason, learn, and perform any intellectual task that an average person can. It's the robot butler, the helpful co-pilot. It is, by definition, a peer. This is not what Ilya Sutskever is worried about. He is worried about the next inevitable step. ASI, Artificial Superintelligence. ASI is not an AI that is as smart as a human. It is an AI that is vastly, unimaginably smarter. Remember the takeoff? The recursive self-improvement? The moment an AGI is created, the moment it is just 1% smarter than a human, it can use that superior intelligence to improve itself. In a week, a day, or maybe just an hour, that AGI becomes an ASI. It will not be a peer. It will be an intelligence that is to us what we are to a colony of ants. Ilya Sutskever's entire point, the reason for the coup, the reason for his exit, is that the rest of the world is racing to build AGI, without any idea how to control the ASI that will immediately follow. And that is the mission of his new company. Safe Superintelligence Inc is perhaps the strangest startup in Silicon Valley history. Why? Because its business model is to not have a business model. Its mission is not to build the next chatbot. It's not here to create shiny products, release an app, or chase quarterly revenue. SSI has, in its own words, a singular focus and one goal: to build and control the world's first true superintelligence. This is Ilya's entire premise put into action. At OpenAI, he was forced to sail against the wind. He had to beg for computing power, competing with the product teams who were generating billions in revenue. At SSI, there is no other team. The safety is the product. The alignment is the mission. He has stripped away the distractions, the profit motive, the hype, the shareholders, the race against Google. He is creating a sealed research lab, shielded from the market, to solve the single most important and most dangerous technical challenge in human history. This is his new definition of winning. The old race, the one being run by Sam Altman and Microsoft, is a race to be the first to AGI. Ilya Sutskever just started a new race, a race to be the first to safe ASI. He isn't trying to stop the future he warned about. He is now in a dead sprint to build the only version of it he believes we can survive. This philosophical fear, this vision of an uncontrollable takeoff, was no longer an academic debate for Ilya Sutskever. It was a practical, daily reality inside OpenAI. As the company prepared to launch GPT-4 and the world was celebrating its incredible power, Sutskever was growing increasingly alarmed. He saw the company's focus shifting. Remember, OpenAI was founded as a nonprofit, a research lab with a sacred mission to benefit all of humanity. But in 2019, they had created a new, capped profit arm. This new entity was designed to raise the billions of dollars needed to fund the research, and its primary partner was Microsoft. Suddenly, the nonprofit lab had a corporate master, and that master had shareholders, products, and a desperate race to win against Google. The pressure to release products, to beat the competition, to commercialize, was immense. Sutskever argued that safety was not keeping up with capability. He argued that you cannot build a skyscraper. And then, when you're on the 90th floor, start to think about the foundation. He believed safety had to be built in first. So, in mid-2023, he co-founded a new division inside OpenAI. It was called the Super Alignment Team. This team's goal was not to build the next product. Their one goal? Figure out how to control a future superintelligence, an AI vastly smarter than humans. Ilya and his co-lead, another brilliant researcher named Jan Leike, were given a public promise. 20% of the company's vast computing power would be dedicated to their task. It was a promise that, according to those inside, was never kept. This is where the philosophical war became a war for resources. The Super Alignment Team, the team in charge of saving the world, was forced to beg for computer time. They were fighting for compute, the processing power that is the lifeblood of AI. The vast majority of OpenAI's resources were going to the capability teams, the teams building the next, faster, shinier product, the teams building GPT-5. Jan Leike, his co-lead, would later write a devastating public letter explaining his resignation. He said the company's culture had changed, that safety culture and processes have taken a backseat to shiny products. He wrote that he and his team were sailing against the wind, that they were struggling for compute. Imagine that. The chief scientist and the head of alignment were struggling to get the resources they were promised inside the company that was supposed to be leading this mission. Sutskever saw this as a fatal flaw. He saw the commercial incentives, the hype, the billions of dollars as a drug, a dangerous distraction from the real work. And he saw CEO Sam Altman as the personification of that distraction. Altman was the brilliant salesman, the evangelist, the one pushing the company to go faster, to integrate with Microsoft, to launch the GPT store, when Sutskever believed they should be tapping the brakes. This wasn't a disagreement about spreadsheets. It was a fundamental, existential disagreement about the future of the human race. Ilya Sutskever became convinced that the company he had co-founded was now the single greatest threat to humanity's survival. He believed the leadership was not taking the risk of AGI Takeoff seriously enough. And so, we arrive at the 4 days of chaos. It began on Friday, November 17th, 2023. Ilya Sutskever, leveraging his power as a board member, reportedly told Sam Altman he was being fired. Altman was blindsided. The entire world was blindsided. The board, led by Sutskever and other safety-focused members, released a vague, brutal statement. They said Altman had been not consistently candid in his communications. The world saw a palace coup, a betrayal. What followed was the most intense 96 hours in Silicon Valley history. Microsoft, whose $13 billion investment was suddenly in chaos, was furious. The employees of OpenAI, who revered Sam Altman, staged a mass revolt. Over 700 of them signed a letter, threatening to quit, unless Sam was reinstated. And who was the first name on that list? Threatening to quit. Ilya Sutskever. Within 24 hours of the coup, he had flipped. He posted a public message. I deeply regret my participation in the board's actions. I never intended to harm OpenAI. What happened? He had lost. The idealist had lost to the pragmatists. The philosopher king had lost to the employees and the shareholders. He had tried to slam the brakes, and instead, the entire company had threatened to drive off a cliff without him. By Tuesday, November 21st, it was over. Sam Altman returned, not just as CEO, but as a king. The old board was dissolved. The safety-focused members were gone. Ilya Sutskever, the technical genius, the co-founder, the man who built the temple, was stripped of all power. He went silent. He disappeared from public view. He had sacrificed his reputation, his credibility, and his position, all based on a warning that, at the time, only he seemed to fully understand. The world moved on. The hype resumed. But Ilya did not. So what is the legacy of Ilya Sutskever? His journey, from the creator of the revolution to its loudest warning, and now to its potential savior, reveals the central tension of our modern age. His story has forced us to see that we are not in one race. We are in two. The first is the one you read about every day, the race for capability. It's the race between Microsoft and Google, between OpenAI and Anthropic. It's the race to build the smartest model, to win the market, to launch the next product, to capture the billions of dollars. But Ilya Sutskever's entire life, his coup, his exit, and his new mission at SSI is a desperate attempt to tell us about the second race, the race for control. His doctrine is a simple, terrifying warning. If the first race finishes before the second, it doesn't matter who wins. Everyone loses. His actions tell us that the future of AI development cannot be left to the same forces that drive our economy. It cannot be driven by hype, or stock prices, or the pressure to ship the next product. This is no longer a theoretical debate happening in the future. It is a practical, urgent question happening now. And his warning, his entire life's work, leads us to the final, most important question. How do we prepare for this future? What does this mean for you? The preparations are not what you think. For us, as individuals, the answer is not, everyone must learn to code. The AI will be a better coder than any human. The answer is to double down on the things that are uniquely human. It is to cultivate critical thinking, to learn how to ask a machine the right questions, to learn how to spot bias, to verify information, and to use these powerful new tools as a co-pilot, not as an oracle. The future belongs to the adaptable, the curious, the creative, the empathetic. The skills of human connection and high-level abstract reasoning will become more valuable than ever before. And for us, as a society, the preparation is far more urgent. Ilya Sutskever's warning is that we cannot be silent. We cannot afford to be passive consumers of this technology. We must demand a public debate. We must ask, What are our values? What do we want this intelligence to optimize for? Human well-being? Or corporate profit? These decisions, the decisions about the very future of human consciousness, cannot be left in the hands of a few dozen engineers and billionaires in Silicon Valley. This debate belongs to us. The journey of Ilya Sutskever is not just the story of one man. It's the story of all of us. He is, perhaps, the ultimate believer. He believes in artificial general intelligence so profoundly that he is dedicating his life and sacrificing his reputation to ensure that the arrival of AGI is not the last thing humanity ever creates. He has forced the entire world to ask the one question we had been too busy and too excited to ask. We are all building a future powered by AI, but are we building a future we can survive?